3 months ago, I buried my mother. I'd spent the last 10 years of my life caring for her. Every doctor's appointment, every medication, every sleepless night when she couldn't breathe right, every diaper change when she couldn't make it to the bathroom in time, every meal I cooked, every bed I made, every tear I wiped from her cheek when she was scared of dying alone. For 10 years, I was there, every single day. My siblings? They couldn't be bothered to visit. But the day after the funeral, 24 hours after we put Mama in the ground, they showed up at my door with a lawyer. Said I'd manipulated her into leaving me the house. Said I'd isolated her from her real family. Said I'd taken advantage of a vulnerable old woman. They wanted what they called their fair share. What they didn't know was that Mama had been waiting for this day. She knew exactly what her children were. And in that lockbox in her bedroom closet, she'd left me everything I needed to destroy them. My name is Vernon Crawford. I'm 64 years old. And this is the story of how my siblings tried to steal my mother's home and how Mama made sure they never got a dime. I need to take you back a bit, because this story doesn't make sense without understanding our family, who we were, who we became. Mama, Evelyn May Crawford, had 4 children. Carol was the oldest, born in 1949. Then came Douglas in 1953. Then Patricia, we called her Patty, in 1955. And then, 12 years later, there was me. I was the surprise, the afterthought, as Carol used to call me when she thought Mama wasn't listening. By the time I came along, Carol was already a teenager with 1 foot out the door. Doug was learning to drive. Patty was in middle school. They had their own lives, their own friends, their own futures. I was just the baby everyone had to work around. But Mama never treated me like an afterthought. To her, I was a blessing. God gave me you when I needed you most, she used to say. And I think she was right, because when my father died of a heart attack in 1976, I was 15 years old, it was just me and Mama left in that house. The older kids had already scattered. Carol had moved to Florida with her husband Richard. Doug was in Texas, working his way up at some car dealership. Patty had settled in Ohio with her family. They called on holidays, sent cards on birthdays, promised to visit soon. But soon never came. It was me and Mama. That was our family. I became a teacher right out of college. Shop class, woodworking, auto mechanics, the practical skills nobody teaches anymore. I spent 32 years at Jefferson High School, watching kids who couldn't sit still in English class come alive when they had a wrench in their hands. I loved that job, loved the students, loved seeing them build something with their own 2 hands and realized they were capable of more than they thought. But when Mama started declining, I knew what I had to do. She was 84 when the falls started. Little things at first, tripping over the rug, losing her balance in the bathroom. Then the memory issues, leaving the stove on, forgetting to eat, calling me by my father's name. The doctors said she needed full-time care. They gave me brochures for nursing homes, facilities with locked doors and fluorescent lights, and staff who didn't know her favorite hymn or how she liked her coffee. I couldn't do it. I couldn't put Mama in a place like that. So in 2015, at 58 years old, I took early retirement, moved back into the family home, and for the next 10 years, I was her caregiver, every single day. I don't say this for sympathy. I say it so you understand what I gave up. I had a pension. I could have traveled, could have dated, maybe found someone to grow old with, could have done 100 things that retired people do. Instead, I spent my 60s changing my mother's sheets at 3 a.m., crushing her pills into applesauce because she couldn't swallow them whole, holding her hand during panic attacks when she forgot where she was, driving her to dialysis 3 times a week, reading to her when her eyes got too bad. It was hard. the hardest thing I've ever done. But it was also an honor, because Mama had given me everything: her love, her time, her wisdom. Taking care of her was the least I could do. And where were my siblings during all this? Carol visited twice in 10 years. Once for Christmas in 2017, when she complained about the cold the entire time and left after 2 days. Once more in 2021, for about 4 hours, because she was passing through on her way somewhere more important. Doug came once, Christmas of 2018. He spent most of the visit on his phone, made a few comments about how the house needed repairs, and left the next morning. That was the last time Mama saw her oldest son in person. Patty was a little better. She called every few months, sent birthday cards. But she lived in Ohio, and the drive was just too far. She hadn't been home in 7 years. So it was me. Every doctor's appointment, every pharmacy run, every midnight crisis. Me. I didn't resent it. I really didn't. I loved my mother. I wanted to be there. But I did notice who wasn't. Now here's where I need to tell you something strange. During the last year of Mama's life, she started asking me to help her with what she called projects. Nothing unusual at first: organizing old papers, sorting through photographs, writing letters to old friends. But then it got more specific. She asked me to help her record messages on a digital voice recorder I'd bought her years ago. She'd sit in her chair, hold the recorder up to her mouth, and speak clearly into it. Dates, names, details. Carol called today. She didn't ask how I was feeling. She asked when I was updating my will. Douglas sent a letter asking if I'd consider selling the house now and distributing the proceeds early. His exact words.
Patty hasn't called in 3 weeks. Vernon took me to dialysis this morning. We stopped for ice cream on the way home. I didn't understand why she was doing it. I figured it was just her way of keeping a diary, something to occupy her mind. She also had me help her write letters. Some she'd seal in envelopes and write names on the front, for Carol, for Douglas, for the lawyer. She'd put them in a metal lockbox she kept in her bedroom closet. "What's all this for, Mama?" I asked once. She just smiled. "You'll know when it's time, baby. You'll know." I didn't push. Mama had earned the right to her secrets. But looking back, I understand now. She knew. She knew exactly what her children were. And she spent her final year preparing for the battle she knew would come. My mother was 94 years old, barely able to walk, struggling to breathe most days. But her mind was sharp as a tack, and she was building a case. I just didn't know it yet. Mama died on a Tuesday morning in August 19th, 2025. I was holding her hand. The hospice nurse was there, checking vitals. Mama had been fading for days, sleeping more, eating less, her breathing shallow and labored. But that morning she woke up, looked right at me. Her eyes were clear, like a fog had lifted. "Vernon." "I'm here, Mama." "They're going to come for this house." Her voice was weak but steady. "Your brother and sisters, they're going to say terrible things about you. They're going to try to take everything." "Mama, don't worry about that." "Listen to me." She squeezed my hand with what little strength she had left. "I left you the truth. It's in the lockbox. And when the time comes, when they come for you, you show them exactly who they are." I didn't know what to say. I just nodded. She smiled, that same smile she'd had my whole life. "My baby," she said. "You were the only one who loved me enough to stay." She closed her eyes. An hour later, she was gone. I didn't open the lockbox right away. Didn't think about it much. I was too busy planning the funeral, notifying family, going through the motions of grief. Carol flew in from Florida. Doug drove from Texas. Patty came from Ohio. For the first time in years, all 4 of us were in the same room. The funeral was beautiful. Pastor Reeves gave a lovely eulogy. People from church, from the neighborhood, from Mama's old quilting circle, they all came. They told stories about her, cried, laughed, remembered. But I noticed something at the reception. Carol, Doug, and Richard, Carol's husband, kept huddling together, whispering, looking at me. I told myself it was nothing. They were grieving. People act strange when they grieve. But the next morning, they showed up at my door. All of them, together. And they weren't there to mourn. They were there to take what they thought belonged to them. And that's when everything changed. Carol didn't even knock.
She just walked in, Doug and Richard right behind her, like she owned the place, like she'd never left. "Vernon, we need to talk." I was still in my bathrobe, still had coffee in my hand. It was 9 in the morning and I hadn't slept in 3 days. About what? About Mama's estate. Carol sat down at the kitchen table, the same table where Mama and I had shared 1,000 breakfasts over the years. About the will. Richard pulled out a folder. Doug stood by the door, arms crossed, blocking the exit like I might try to run. "We've been talking," Carol continued, "and we have some concerns." Concerns? About the way things were handled, the way decisions were made, the way Mama's will was influenced. I set down my coffee. "What are you talking about?" Richard slid a document across the table. "We've consulted with an attorney, a good one, estate law specialist. He reviewed the will and found several red flags." Red flags? "Vernon, the will leaves everything to you." Carol's voice was patient, like she was explaining something to a child. "The house, the savings, everything. And we, the other 3 children, get nothing, not a penny." That's what Mama wanted. "Is it?" Doug finally spoke. His voice was hard. "Or is that what you wanted, and you just convinced an old, confused woman to go along with it?" I felt my hands start to shake. Mama wasn't confused. She was 94 years old, Vernon, barely mobile, couldn't remember what day it was half the time. "That's not true. You isolated her." Carol leaned forward. "For 10 years, you kept her away from us, controlled who she talked to, controlled what she heard, made yourself indispensable so she'd have no choice but to leave everything to you. I didn't isolate anyone. You chose not to visit. We had lives, Vernon, jobs, families, responsibilities. We couldn't just drop everything and move in like you did. I dropped everything because someone had to take care of her, and none of you would." Doug laughed, not a real laugh, a cold, mocking sound. "That was your choice. You don't get to profit from it." The next hour was the worst of my life. They laid out their case like prosecutors at a trial. Richard had clearly been coaching them. Every accusation was precise, rehearsed. Vernon isolated Mama from her family. Vernon controlled all her finances. Vernon prevented phone calls and visits. Vernon manipulated a vulnerable elderly woman into changing her will. They claimed Mama had left equal shares to all 4 children for years until I moved in and worked on her. They claimed she didn't have the mental capacity to make decisions. They claimed I'd committed undue influence. Richard used that phrase about a dozen times. I tried to defend myself. The will hasn't changed since 2010, 15 years ago, before I even moved in. Carol waved her hand. "We'll have our lawyer look into that. Mama's doctor can confirm she was mentally sound. We'll get our own expert to evaluate the records. You never visited, you never called, you weren't here." Doug stepped closer. "That's what you wanted, isn't it? Keep us away so you could have her all to yourself, have this house all to yourself." I looked at the kitchen around me.
The faded wallpaper Mama had picked out in 1985, the window where she used to watch birds in the backyard, the chair where she sat every morning with her coffee, even when she couldn't lift the cup herself anymore. This was my home, our home, the only place I'd ever belonged. And they wanted to take it from me. Richard slid another document across the table. This is a letter from our attorney. We're filing to contest the will. The grounds are lack of mental capacity and undue influence. I didn't pick it up. If you want to avoid a lengthy court battle, and trust me, Vernon, this could drag on for years, we're prepared to offer a settlement. He clasped his hands on the table. You keep the house, we split the liquid assets, savings, investments, 4 ways. And you pay each of us $40,000 for your caregiving reimbursement. Caregiving reimbursement? You've been living here rent-free for 10 years, eating food paid for by Mama's accounts, using her car, her utilities, her everything. We think it's only fair that the rest of us get compensated for your arrangement. I stared at him. This man who'd married my sister 35 years ago and never once asked about Mama's health? This man who'd visited twice and spent both trips complaining about the food? This man who couldn't name Mama's doctor, her medications, her favorite hymn? He wanted compensation. And if I don't agree, then we go to court. Richard smiled. And trust me, Vernon, juries don't like it when one sibling gets everything and the others get nothing. They especially don't like it when that sibling has been the sole caregiver with no oversight. It raises questions. Carol touched my hand. Just think about it, Vernon. We're not trying to hurt you. We just want what's fair. I pulled my hand away. Get out of my house. They left, but the damage was done. For 3 days, I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't think straight. I sat in Mama's room, staring at her empty bed. The sheets were still the way I'd left them after she passed. Her slippers were still by the nightstand. Her reading glasses were still on the pillow, and all I could hear was their voices. You isolated her. You manipulated her. You don't get to profit from it. Had I done something wrong? Maybe they were right. Maybe I had kept Mama too close. Maybe I should have pushed harder for Carol and Doug to visit. Maybe I should have arranged more family gatherings, more phone calls, more connections. Maybe I was the problem. The thought sat in my chest like a stone. I'd given up 10 years of my life to care for my mother. I'd loved her. I'd held her hand while she died.
And now her other children were calling me a manipulator, a thief. Maybe I didn't deserve the house. Maybe I didn't deserve anything. But on the 3rd night, I remembered. I was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every accusation in my head. And Mama's voice came back to me. They're going to come for this house. They're going to say terrible things about you. But don't you worry, baby. I left you the truth. It's in the lockbox. The lockbox? I got up, walked to Mama's bedroom closet, pushed aside the boxes of old clothes, the bags of quilting fabric she'd never use again. There it was, gray metal, combination lock. Mama had told me the combination years ago. Her birthday, 10/14/31. I turned the dial. The lock clicked open. And what I found inside changed everything. The first thing I saw was a letter. White envelope, Mama's handwriting on the front. To whoever is challenging this will. I opened it with shaking hands. If you're reading this, you've come to contest my final wishes. I knew you would. Carol, Douglas, I know exactly who you are. I watched you abandon me for years. I heard every phone call where you asked about money instead of my health. I read every letter where you demanded I sell this house so you could get your inheritance early. And I documented everything. I wasn't senile. I wasn't confused. I was paying attention. And now, whoever is trying to take this house from my Vernon, you should know, I have receipts. Every visit, or lack thereof, is logged. Every phone call is noted. Every recording is time-stamped. My doctor, Dr. Helen Park, has provided a letter confirming my mental competency, dated 6 months before my death. Pastor Daniel Reeves has witnessed my wishes and will testify if needed. I am of sound mind as I write this. I choose Vernon because Vernon chose me. He gave up his career, his freedom, 10 years of his life to care for me. The rest of you gave me excuses. This is my final word, and I intend it to be heard. Below the letter was her signature, notarized, dated March 15th, 2025, 5 months before she died. But that wasn't all. Beneath the letter was a digital voice recorder, the same one she'd been using for her projects. I pressed play. Mama's voice filled the room. This is Evelyn May Crawford. The date is January 7th, 2025. I am of sound mind and body, despite what my children may try to claim. Carol called today. She didn't ask how I was feeling. She didn't ask about my dialysis. She asked when I was planning to update my will. This is the 3rd time she's asked this month. I pressed forward. February 22nd, 2025. Douglas sent a letter. He wants me to sell the house now and distribute the proceeds early. He said I'm not getting any younger and the house is too much for Vernon to handle. He didn't ask how I was. He didn't ask about my health. He asked about money. And another.
April 3rd, 2025. Vernon took me to dialysis today. On the way home, we stopped for ice cream at that little shop on Main Street. He knows butterscotch is my favorite. Carol hasn't called in 6 weeks. Douglas hasn't called since Christmas. Vernon is here every day, every single day. There were dozens of recordings, years of documentation, every broken promise, every missed visit, every phone call that was really about inheritance. Mama had been building a case, and she'd done it perfectly. At the bottom of the lockbox, I found one more thing, a DVD in a paper sleeve. The front was labeled in Mama's handwriting, "Watch this, Vermin." I went to the living room, found the old DVD player I'd bought Mama years ago, put in the disc, and there she was, Mama, sitting in her bedroom chair, the window behind her, sunlight streaming in. She looked tired, but her eyes were sharp, clear, present. "Hey, baby," she smiled at the camera. "If you're watching this, I'm gone. And if I know your brothers and sisters, and I do, they've come sniffing around for the house, for the money, for everything you spent 10 years earning with your love and sacrifice." She leaned forward. "I want you to know something, Vernon. You didn't manipulate me. You didn't isolate me. You loved me. You cared for me. You gave up your life to make sure I didn't die alone in some cold nursing home somewhere." Her eyes glistened. "Your brother and sisters, they made their choices. They chose their lives over their mother, and that's fine. That's their right. But they don't get to come back now and pretend they were here. They don't get to rewrite history." She lifted a piece of paper. "I've got it all documented. Every visit, every phone call, every card they sent, and every one they didn't. When this goes to court, and baby, I know it will, you show them this video. You show them my letters. You show them my recordings." She set down the paper and looked directly into the camera. "And you tell them this. I wasn't senile. I wasn't confused. I wasn't manipulated. I knew exactly what I was doing. And I chose Vernon, my baby, the only one of you who loved me enough to stay." She kissed her fingers and touched them to the lens. "I love you, Vernon. Now go make them pay." I sat in that living room for a long time after the video ended, crying, laughing, overwhelmed. Mama had known. She'd always known. And in her final year, when she was weak and tired and dying, she'd spent her energy protecting me. Even from the grave, she was still taking care of her baby. The next morning, I called an attorney, Miriam Foster, estate law specialist. I'd seen her ads in the local paper for years, protecting your legacy. I told her everything, the siblings, the accusations, the threats, and then I showed her the lockbox. She went through every document, every recording, every page of Mama's meticulous logs. When she finished, she looked up at me with an expression I'll never forget.
Mr. Crawford, I've been practicing law for 30 years. I've handled dozens of contested wills, and I have never seen a client this prepared. She set down Mama's letter. Your mother was a remarkable woman. She didn't just defend you, she built an airtight case. Their challenge won't just fail, it'll be humiliated. What do we do now? Miriam smiled. Now we let them dig their own grave. They've requested mediation before going to trial. We'll attend, we'll sit there politely, and when they're done making their accusations, we'll show them exactly what their mother really thought of them. She stood up and offered her hand. They think they're fighting a grieving old man who doesn't know what hit him. They have no idea that your mother's been preparing for this battle for years. I shook her hand. Let's finish what Mama started. 3 weeks later, we met for mediation. It was a gray Thursday morning in November, the kind of day where the clouds hang low and the air smells like rain that hasn't fallen yet. We gathered at the county courthouse in a conference room with fluorescent lights and a long wooden table. On one side, Carol, Doug, Richard, and their attorney, a slick man in a tailored suit named Bradley Simmons. He had a briefcase full of documents and a confident smile. He thought this was going to be easy. On the other side, me and Miriam Foster. Patty sat at the end of the table by herself. She hadn't spoken to me since the confrontation at the house, but she hadn't fully committed to Carol's side either. She just looked tired, uncertain. I understood that feeling. The mediator, a retired judge named Harold Patterson, called us to order. This is a mediation regarding the estate of Evelyn May Crawford, deceased. The petitioners, Carol Crawford Hayes, Douglas Crawford, and Patricia Crawford, are contesting the will on grounds of lack of mental capacity and undue influence. The respondent is Vernon Crawford, sole beneficiary. Let's begin with the petitioner's statement. Bradley Simmons stood up like he was about to deliver a closing argument to a jury. Thank you, Your Honor. Our position is simple. He clicked open his briefcase. Evelyn Crawford was 94 years old at the time of her death. She suffered from numerous age-related conditions that affected her cognition. She was almost entirely dependent on one person, her youngest son, Vernon, for all aspects of her care. He gestured toward me. Mr. Vernon Crawford retired early and moved into his mother's home. For 10 years, he controlled her environment, controlled her finances, controlled who she spoke to and when. The other children, who had busy lives and responsibilities of their own, were effectively cut off. Carol nodded along, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. The will, leaving everything to Vernon, was executed during this period of isolation. Our experts believe that Mrs. Crawford lacked the mental capacity to make such a significant decision, and that she was unduly influenced by the one person who had complete control over her life. He slid a folder across the table. We're seeking an equitable distribution of the estate. 4 children, 4 equal shares. That's what any reasonable mother would have wanted. He sat down with a satisfied smile. Richard patted Carol on the shoulder. Doug crossed his arms, looking smug. They thought they'd won. Miriam didn't stand up right away. She just sat there, hands folded on the table, letting the silence stretch. Bradley shifted in his seat. "Mrs. Foster, your response?" Miriam looked up, calm as still water. "Before I respond, I'd like to enter some evidence into the record, if the mediator permits." Judge Patterson nodded. "Go ahead." Miriam opened her briefcase. Unlike Bradley's neat stack of legal documents, hers contained something different. A digital voice recorder, a thick binder, a DVD, and a stack of letters in aged envelopes. Let's start with the claim that Mrs. Crawford lacked mental capacity. She slid a document across the table. This is a letter from Dr. Helen Park, Mrs. Crawford's physician of 18 years. It's dated March 15, 2025, 5 months before Mrs. Crawford's death. It states, and I quote, "I have examined Evelyn Crawford on multiple occasions and can confirm that she demonstrates full mental competency. She is alert, oriented, and capable of making her own decisions regarding her health, finances, and estate." Bradley glanced at the letter, frowning. "One doctor's opinion doesn't—" "I'm not finished." Miriam pulled out another document. This is a sworn statement from Pastor Daniel Reeves, who has known the Crawford family for over 40 years and visited Mrs. Crawford regularly during her final years. He confirms that she was sharp as a tack and knew exactly what she wanted. He also confirms that, to his knowledge, the only child who visited her regularly was Vernon. She looked at Carol and Doug. The pastor will testify if needed, as will Dr. Park. Bradley's smile was fading. Carol's tissue dabbing had stopped. "Now," Miriam continued, "let's address the claim of isolation." She opened the thick binder. This is a visitor log maintained by Mrs. Crawford herself. It covers the period from 2015 to 2025, 10 years. Every visitor is noted by name, date, and duration of stay. She flipped to a tabbed section. Carol Crawford Hayes visited her mother twice in 10 years. December 2017 for 2 days, April 2021 for approximately 4 hours. She flipped to another tab. Douglas Crawford visited once, December 2018. He left the following morning. Another tab. Patricia Crawford has not visited in 7 years. She sent birthday cards and occasional phone calls. She closed the binder and looked directly at Bradley.
Mr. Crawford didn't isolate his mother. Your clients chose not to visit for a decade. The room was silent. Richard leaned over to whisper something to Bradley. Bradley waved him off, irritated. Visitor logs can be fabricated. These aren't just Vernon's notes. Miriam pulled out the stack of envelopes. These are letters Mrs. Crawford wrote to each of her children over the years. Some were sent, some were not. All of them are in her handwriting, which can be verified. She opened one. This is from December 2019, written to Douglas. "Dear Doug, I haven't seen you in over a year. Vernon says you've been busy. I understand, but I'm 94 years old, son. I don't know how many Christmases I have left. Would it really be so hard to visit your mother?" She opened another. This one is to Carol, dated February 2022. "Carol, you called today asking about the will again. You didn't ask about my health. You didn't ask about my dialysis. You asked about your inheritance. Is that all I am to you now? A check that hasn't been cashed yet?" Carol's face had gone pale. Doug was staring at the table. Mrs. Crawford wasn't confused. Miriam's voice was steady. She wasn't manipulated. She was watching. She was documenting. And she knew exactly which of her children actually loved her. But Miriam wasn't done. She picked up the digital recorder. Mrs. Crawford also kept audio recordings, dozens of them. Would you like to hear a few? Bradley stood up. This is highly irregular. We have no way to authenticate. The recordings are time-stamped and include verbal confirmation of the date and Mrs. Crawford's identity. They're admissible, and you know it. Judge Patterson nodded. Play the recordings. Miriam pressed play. Mama's voice filled the conference room. This is Evelyn May Crawford. The date is January 7th, 2025. I am of sound mind. Carol called today. She didn't ask how I was feeling. She didn't ask about my dialysis. She asked when I was planning to update my will. This is the third time this month she's asked about the will. Another recording. February 22nd, 2025. Douglas sent a letter. He wants me to sell the house now and distribute the proceeds early. His exact words were, "You're not getting any younger, and the house is too much for Vernon to handle." He didn't ask how I was. He asked about money. And another. April 3rd, 2025. Vernon took me to dialysis today. We stopped for ice cream on the way home. Butterscotch, my favorite. Carol hasn't called in 6 weeks. Douglas hasn't called since Christmas. Vernon is here every day. Every single day. Miriam stopped the recording. The room was dead silent. Carol was crying now. Real tears, not performance. Doug had his head in his hands. Richard was staring at the table, jaw tight.
Mrs. Crawford documented everything. Every visit, every phone call, every letter. Every time her children asked about money instead of her health. She knew this day would come, and she prepared for it. Bradley Simmons looked like a man who just realized he brought a knife to a gunfight. "Mrs. Foster, perhaps we could take a recess. One more thing." Miriam picked up the DVD. Mrs. Crawford also left a video message. She recorded it herself, with Vernon's help, 4 months before her death. I think the petitioners should see it. She walked to a TV mounted on the wall, slid the disc into the attached player. And there she was, Mama, sitting in her bedroom chair, sunlight streaming through the window, her eyes clear, her voice steady. "If you're watching this, you've come to take my home from Vernon." Carol let out a small sob. "I'm going to say this once, and I want it on record. I am not senile. I am not confused. I am not being manipulated. I know exactly what I'm doing, and I know exactly who each of my children is." She leaned forward, looking directly into the camera. "Carol, you visited me twice in 10 years. Twice. And both times, you spent more time on your phone than you did with me. Douglas, you came once and left the next morning because the house was too depressing. Patty, I know you wanted to come, but you let your siblings convince you not to. I forgive you for that." She paused, her eyes glistened. "Vernon gave up everything to take care of me. His career, his freedom, 10 years of his life. He fed me, bathed me, held me when I was scared. He never complained, he never asked for anything in return. He just loved me, the way a child is supposed to love a mother." Her voice hardened. "So if you're watching this because you're trying to take his inheritance, the inheritance he earned, I have one thing to say to you. Shame on you." She lifted her chin. "I chose Vernon because Vernon chose me, and nothing you do will ever change that." She kissed her fingers and touched them to the camera lens. "My baby, I love you. Now show them exactly who they are." The screen went black. The silence in that room was the loudest thing I've ever heard.
Carol was weeping, not the delicate performative tears she'd used before. These were ugly sobs, the kind that come from somewhere deep. Doug wouldn't look at anyone. He just stared at the table, his face red. Richard was frozen. His legal strategy, his confidence, his smug certainty, all of it gone. Even Bradley Simmons had nothing to say. Miriam let the silence hang for a long moment. Then she spoke. Mrs. Crawford was not incompetent. She was not isolated. She was not manipulated. She was a 94-year-old woman who knew exactly who loved her and who only showed up when there was money to collect. She gathered her documents.
The petitioners have no case. If they pursue this further, my client is prepared to countersue for defamation and legal harassment. The evidence we've presented today will be made available to any court, and I can assure you it will not play well in front of a jury. She looked at Bradley. I recommend your clients withdraw their challenge today before this gets any more embarrassing. Bradley turned to Carol and Doug. They didn't meet his eyes. We need a moment to confer with our clients, he said quietly. Judge Patterson nodded. We'll take a 15-minute recess. I stepped outside into the hallway. The rain had finally started, a soft drizzle that misted against the courthouse windows. I stood there, watching it fall, trying to process what had just happened. Mama had done it. Even from beyond the grave, she'd won. Vernon, I turned. It was Patty. Her eyes were red, her hands were shaking. Can we talk? We walked to a bench by the window. She sat down slowly, like she was carrying something heavy. I'm so sorry, she said. I should have known. I should have asked more questions. Carol kept saying you'd changed, that you were controlling Mama, that you wouldn't let us visit. And I believed her. I don't know why. I believed her. I didn't say anything. Watching that video, she wiped her eyes. Mama forgave me. She said she forgave me. But I don't know if I can forgive myself. I looked at my sister, the one who'd always been somewhere in the middle. Not as aggressive as Carol and Doug, but not strong enough to stand against them. Patty, you're here now. That counts for something. I should have been here 10 years ago. Yeah, you should have, but you weren't, and you can't change that. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. All you can change is what happens next, I said. She looked at me. Is there a next for us? I thought about it, about the years of silence, about the phone calls that never came, about Mama asking for her children and only one of them showing up. But I also thought about Mama's video. She'd forgiven Patty, said so on camera. If Mama could forgive, maybe I could too. Call me sometime, I said. Not about the will, not about money. Just call. We'll see where it goes. She nodded. I will, I promise. This time, I believed her. The recess ended. Bradley Simmons stood up, looking like a man who'd just swallowed something bitter. My clients have decided to withdraw their challenge to the will. We will not be pursuing this matter further. Carol didn't look at me. Doug walked out without a word. Richard stopped at the door. He turned like he was going to say something, some excuse, some justification. I looked him right in the eye. He turned away and left. That was the last time I saw him. That was 3 months ago.
Carol and Doug haven't contacted me since. I hear from mutual relatives that they've been telling anyone who'll listen that I tricked the mediator and manipulated the process. Same song, different verse. I don't care. Let them talk. Patty called last month, then again 2 weeks later. We talked for an hour about Mama, about the old days, about nothing in particular. She's coming to visit in the spring. I told her I'd show her Mama's garden. The house is mine now, legally, completely, finally mine. I still sleep in the same room I grew up in. Still make coffee in the same kitchen where Mama taught me to cook. Still sit on the same porch where we watched 1,000 sunsets together. Sometimes, late at night, I swear I can still hear her voice. My baby, you were the only one who loved me enough to stay. Last Sunday, I was out in the backyard. Mama's garden was coming back to life. The tulips she'd planted decades ago were starting to push through the soil. The rose bushes she'd tended for 50 years were budding. I knelt down in the dirt, pulled a few weeds, just like she taught me. And I thought about what she'd done. At 94 years old, barely able to walk, struggling to breathe, she'd spent her last year preparing for a battle she knew I'd have to fight. She documented everything, recorded everything, written letters she knew would someday be evidence. She couldn't protect me in person anymore, so she found another way. Even at the end, Mama was still taking care of me. I looked up at the sky. Gray clouds, but the sun was breaking through. I got it, Mama, I said quietly. Just like you said. I showed them who they are. The wind rustled through the rose bushes, just for a moment, and I could swear I heard her laughing. If you're watching this, and you're the one who stayed, the one who gave up your career, your freedom, your life to care for someone you loved, I want you to know you're not alone. There are people out there who will try to make you feel guilty for it. Siblings will show up after years of silence and demand their fair share. Family members who'll accuse you of things you never did. Don't let them. Document everything. Keep records. Talk to a lawyer before you need one. And if your loved one is still alive, help them protect you the way my mama protected me. Because the people who show up when times are hard, those are the ones who deserve to be there when times are good. My brother and sister forgot that. Mama didn't, and neither did I. If you've been through something like this, if you cared for someone while others walked away, I'd love to hear your story in the comments. Sometimes it helps just knowing you're not alone. And if you know a caregiver who's exhausted and underappreciated, share this video with them. Let them know their sacrifice matters. My brother and sister forgot that. Mama didn't, and neither did I. If you've been through something like this, if you cared for someone while others walked away, I'd love to hear your story in the comments. Sometimes it helps just knowing you're not alone. And if you know a caregiver who's exhausted and underappreciated, share this video with them. Let them know their sacrifice matters.
I share stories like this every week here on John's Revenge Stories. Real people who stood up for themselves when everyone counted them out. If this story meant something to you, hit that subscribe button and the bell so you don't miss the next one. And if you think Carol and Doug got exactly what they deserved, hit that like button. It really helps more people find these stories. Take care of yourselves, friends. And remember, the people who show up when times are hard are the ones who deserve to be there when times are good. Mama knew that, and now so do I. I'll see you in the next one.